What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories, the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of the Locked On Rockets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we're going to be talking to Cyrus Saatsaz of the Locked On Warriors podcast, as the Warriors are now back on top of not just the Western Conference, but the league, how they're doing it, who's stepping up, and more. After a quick message from our friends over at Truebill, because look, do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your hard-earned money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. I know that that's happened to me before. On average, people save up to $720 per year with Truebill. Because companies make subscriptions so hard to cancel, Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap, one click, one press. It is that easy. Don't fall for any more subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/lockedonnba. Go right now. That's truebill.com/lockedonnba. It could save you thousands a year. That's truebill.com/lockedonnba. Joining me now is Cyrus Saatsaz off of Locked On Warriors. Cyrus, fresh off of a Christmas Day win against now the number 2 team in the association, the Golden State Warriors, coming off the win against the Phoenix Suns. How much of a statement game was this for the Warriors?
I thought, I was telling on my Twitter account, I was telling the people following me, because I'm guessing most of them follow me for Warriors info and commentary, and I was telling them to take the result of this game with a grain of salt, because they were missing four, vitally important players in Jordan Poole, Andrew Wiggins, Damian Lee, who's been a very underrated contributor, and then last minute Moses Moody was in health and safety protocols. And so my expectations were low, because Phoenix is a hostile crowd. The Suns are easily, in my opinion, the second best team in the Western Conference after the Warriors. But the way the Warriors came out and not just beat them, but even though, they beat them by, I think, 9 total, but given it was a road game, given the players they were missing, Phoenix had their whole squad. I would call that a dominating performance. I would call that a statement game. And the statement was the Warriors telling the Western Conference and probably the whole NBA, hey, you're on notice. We're the team to beat here. And it was huge. And I'm sure, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but from my perspective, it was a massively huge win for them.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was actually going to tee you up for the very next. I was going to say, are the Warriors the team to beat this year? Are they? Do you put them firmly right now in front of the Phoenix Suns, who are fresh off of a finals loss, and then in the East, the Milwaukee Bucks, who are the reigning champs?
In my opinion, and the thing I struggle with the most with my show when I'm hosting Locked On Warriors, trying to put my fandom aside and maintaining objectivity. And hopefully I'm doing an okay job with that. But in my humble opinion, the Phoenix Suns are the second best team in the West. And if and when the Warriors and Suns play each other in the Western Conference Finals, which I think is going to happen. I say it's going to be a 6-game series. I don't think it's even going to go 7. I really do believe the Warriors are a clear step ahead of the Suns. The Bucks are the one team that concern me. I value championship experience tremendously. There's something about actually getting over that hump and finally hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy, and then having the ring ceremony and just going through the whole war and attrition of an entire season, culminating with being the one team out of 30 to actually win the title. There's something to say for that in terms of the experience that goes with it. So the Bucks, to me, are a real threat. And honestly, I think the Miami Heat, when all said and done at the end of the regular season, will be the second best team in the East. I'm sorry, Nets fans, that might be a little disrespectful to you folks, but I just don't see it. At least not defensively from their team. But the Bucks are, to me, are alongside the Warriors. They're the defending champs. I have to show them respect. And then in the West, the other team beside the Suns that concerns me, sorry if I'm taking up too much of your time here or going beyond the question, but I really think the Grizzlies, the Utah Jazz, yes, they're very good, but until they prove themselves in the postseason, I just don't really sweat them that much. But the Memphis Grizzlies are the other team that I kind of worry about a little bit in the West, and I actually look at them as the third best team. But to answer your question, after all that, yes, the Warriors to me are the team to beat, just because of the fact that when Klay Thompson comes back, that's 3 players on that team, vitally important players, still in their prime. They haven't peaked yet, with 3 championships under their belt, and that says something. And you have a championship, and you have a coach in Steve Kerr with multiple championships under his belt, not just as a coach, but as a player. And, he was a discipline under, in my opinion, two of the four greatest head coaches in the history of the game, and Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich. I think the Warriors, as objectively as I can say this, are the team to beat. No offense, Rockets fans. I know that's who you represent, but that's my take. Yeah.
No, hey, it's okay. You know what the best part is, Cyrus? I'm going to be able to build this segment as not just a Warriors segment because we hit on so many other teams there. No, look, it seems like every year too, the Warriors adapt and fit new role players, to fit with their identity and what they're trying to achieve on the court. And seemingly they bring in guys, and it's almost like they're resuscitating certain guys' careers. And there's two guys that I want to, talk about here for a moment. And that's been Gary Payton II and Otto Porter Jr. How impactful have those guys been for this Warriors team?
Oh, huge. When the season started, I was on like a radio show about a month and a half ago, and they were asking me which player surprised you the most. And a month and a half ago, I was saying it was Bjelica. They're 6'9" power forward / center, arguably the biggest player on that team, which is saying something. I mean, this team is still small, despite the fact that they're the team to beat. But since then, from then until now, Otto Porter Jr. to me is the most important pickup outside of Andre Iguodala, who, if you're not a Warriors fan, he's so easy to overlook, especially since he's 38 years old at the tail end of his career. But take Iggy aside, and Otto Porter Jr., I mean, this is a player who I don't think is even 30 years old yet. If it wasn't for the injuries, I mean, this is a guy who would be an all-star. I mean, the only reason why he kind of faded and why the Wizards gave up on him despite giving him all that money was the injuries that he was suffering. And now we're seeing a healthy version of Otto Porter Jr., and the results are showing. I mean, that he was the second best player on the Warriors, beating the Suns on the road yesterday. I mean, this was a Suns team that had the best record in the entire NBA. So you touched on two players there. First off, Otto Porter Jr., who in my opinion is vitally important. And the Warriors were lucky because they weren't the only ones pursuing him in the offseason, but he picked the Warriors, and hopefully they're both very thankful for that. And then Gary Payton II is a weird one because the Warriors almost blew it. I mean, the last episode of Locked On Warriors I hosted, we talked about whether or not the Warriors front office is brilliant or lucky, because a lot of these decisions they're making, sometimes you're scratching your head going, what's going on here? Other times it does seem obvious. With Gary Payton II, a lot of Warriors fans last year were clamoring for him to play more. He was not getting minutes, and then he wasn't even signed to a guaranteed deal. And part of that process before the season started was he had to clear waivers before he came back to the Warriors, and 29 other NBA teams just passed up on him. It's crazy. I mean, this is a journeyman who in brief moments we've seen him play has shined, but for some reason he wasn't shining enough for the front office to take a gamble. They still have not given him a guaranteed contract. I believe January 7th is the deadline to do so, and they're obviously going to do it and hopefully give him an extension on top of that. But you're looking at Gary Payton's prodigy. You're looking at a player who we all knew defensively was going to stand out. And at the end of the preseason, the decision was between him and Avery Bradley. And all the Warriors veterans wanted Avery, and it was actually some disconsternation in the locker room with that decision to go with Gary, not necessarily go with Gary Payton, but to not sign Avery Bradley. And now we're seeing, again, Bob Myers in the front office. Were they brilliant? Were they lucky? I don't know. But Gary Payton II, to me, it's weird because he's the biggest 6'3" player we've ever seen. I mean, he plays like a power forward sometimes. He has a post-up game. He's catching lobs like he's a 7-footer and slamming them. I just read a great article from the Undisputed, ESPN's publication, where they did a profile piece on him. I think Mark Spears did it, and it was a brilliant piece because it highlighted that his athleticism comes not from his dad so much, but from his mom, who was also a player. And she was like a track star. She played a college basketball, and I guess she's got the hops, and so I guess that's where he gets that from. But no, these two players, and alongside with Andre Iguodala and Bjelica, I don't want to leave him out. These four guys were veteran minimum pickups that the Warriors just struck gold on. And I don't know if this is the product of the Warriors front office being that smart, or if it's just honestly they're getting really lucky. I err to the side of brilliance just because you look at the Warriors draft history, and especially over the last 5-6 years, they're picking like at the end of the first round, and they're striking gold with Jordan Pools. Kevon Looney was a late first round draft pick. Gary Payton II was just a free agent pickup, but again, they did pick him up. They're the ones who did decide on Bjelica. They're the ones who just did decide that Otto Porter Jr. was a good pickup, and they never even used their mid-level exception. The Warriors still have their mid-level exception just sitting there. That's been a point of criticism from my perspective. But so far, so amazing. And those two players you mentioned, I mean, they're a vitally important part of this whole thing. And Dub Nation is stoked.
And we already hit talked about the fact that this Warriors team wasn't even at full strength on their Christmas Day win against the Suns, missing some key components there. But probably the biggest key component that they're still missing, Klay Thompson. What's his most recent timetable, and what are the expectations for the lineup when he does make it back?
Well, when your team starts the way the Warriors have, where they now have the best record in the NBA, you suddenly have the luxury of not having to rush people back. So Klay Thompson, from everything I've read and heard, first things first, Juan Toscano-Anderson, who's another player that the Warriors picked up, who has been a shocker in terms of contribution and over these last 2 years before this year, the Warriors had 2 years of just down times, right? I mean, 2 years ago, they were a horrible team. Last year, they still missed the playoffs, despite being the finishing with the 8th best record in the West. But they had all these players like Juan Toscano-Anderson. They brought in Gary Payton II last year, Jordan Poole as a development player, Andrew Wiggins, who they brought in last year. These are guys who the Warriors basically spent a year or two bringing people in and integrating them into their system so that when this year came and you have your Steph Curry ready, you have your Draymond Green who's been there but has really been just putting half the effort that he normally does because he saw the writing on the wall of where this Warriors team was. But it gave a chance for these other players to really start to develop. And then so Klay Thompson now, instead of like rushing him back, you have the luxury of waiting. And Juan Toscano-Anderson, the reason why I brought his name up is because he just commented 2 days ago and said that Klay Thompson is burning him and everyone else in practice. Like his impression is Klay Thompson is ready to go. The team does not want him to come back until Klay feels really great about it. Every date you read is speculation. I mean, the sham bomb fizzled. I think he published a date on Twitter about a month or so ago that was not true. The Warriors came out and denied it. So any dates you see are not fact, because what the Warriors have decided to do is just let Klay come back when he feels ready. But man, as I'm sure you know, Jackson, Klay is such a popular figure. I never realized how popular he was until this year, because everything he does is fire. People are just like totally retweeting, liking, commenting, talking about him. And he hasn't even played in over 2 years. It's crazy. But realistically, we're looking at mid-January. I saw the Cavaliers game as one of them. Sorry for the noise in the background. That's my stepson. So most likely the Cavaliers home game is what we're looking at. Joe Lacob has come out and said that he wants it to be a home game, so it's a celebratory environment. And then also don't forget the Warriors are also waiting on the only center on their roster, James Wiseman. He hasn't played either. So these are two big names that we're hoping come back soon, and hopefully they come back healthy and ready to go.
Cyrus, you're going to have us covered for all of that over at Locked On Warriors. Appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA.
Yeah, thank you, Jackson. Take care, man. Thanks.